I'll start now. So good evening, everybody. Tonight we're kind of continuing with our series of highlighting the different offerings that we have in the district for our students as supports. So we have two individuals here to talk about speech and language services. Renee Rizovich is here, and she provides speech and language services to our school age students in the district. And she was actually hired as really a speech interventionist to provide intervention services, which not every district provides their students. So it is a unique position, and we're very fortunate to have her because she comes with a variety of experiences, and she's been doing a great job providing those extra supports. And we are also going to hear from Heather Lang, who also has a variety of experiences with speech language and providing speech and language services. And she provides those services as a private contractor, but for students who are in CPSC, so ages 3 through 5. So we'll get kind of both sides of it, the preschool speech services, but also school age services and what you can expect. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather.
Thank you. So I'm just going to speak a little bit and share a slideshow with you just about the background of speech pathology, because the whole point in SEPTO taking on some of these guest speakers was to highlight the skill sets and the professionalism that's already existing in the district. And so in order to do that, I'm going to share my screen and talk about the background. Renee, though, you can feel free to jump in if I misrepresent or there's something else you could add to it. Can we see that?
Looks good.
All right. So this is just the introductory slide. Renee, I have you on here as Mrs. Waz, so that parents who may not be familiar with your full name also will recognize you as Mrs. Waz. And we both have the same background. There's a minimum requirement of education in order to be a speech pathologist. So we've both attained a master's degree in order to provide speech independently. Whenever you go through the educational process for speech pathology, you start off with a bachelor's, but you have to get your master's in the related field, and that would be you can do special ed, but you also have to then complete a master's degree in speech pathology. And in doing that, you can then get your ASHA certification through completion of your boards. If you want to teach in the school districts, you also have to be New York State certified. So you also have to dual credit in getting all of the credentials for the state licensure for teaching. Beyond that, we do 2 or more internships. It keeps changing slightly. Several hundred hours of supervised clinical experience, and those have to be broken up into pediatrics, adults, and audiology. We have to have a minimum amount of numbers in audiology. That used to be, I think, 175. They could have increased it since then. And then within those domains of pediatrics and adults, you specialize within certain areas. So whenever you are maybe up at the hospital with a family member or get a report on one of your kiddos, you may see speech and language represented through various acronyms. That could be SLP, SPC for speech, ST for speech therapy, SLI, or LLD. And all of those acronyms refer to the same domain, and that's speech and language therapy. Whenever we are completing our credentialing and studying within speech pathology, there's a variety of classes, and many of them include child development and brain development, the process of aging, various cognitive processes like memory, executive function, some of the things that are related to learning, and also what happens during brain injury when those actual domains start to decompensate or become injured. Language acquisition, one of our favorite classes, Renee and I like, anatomy and physiology, the neurology of the head, neck, and face. linguistics, and believe it or not, the science of sound, a physics class of the science of sound, and also how that relates to audiology. So I'll get into some of the facets in within the domain of language, and then again in the domain of speech, but it's not all inclusive. It's beyond this, but I just wanted to kind of give you just a glimpse at some of it. Who we service would be, believe it or not, newborn babies in the NICU. That's usually around early identified maybe trauma or neurological damage, feeding and swallowing. Newborns and infants, that's within the birth to 2 system. That's not a school-based service. Those services all happen at the county level, the Department of Health. It isn't until you get to the preschool level, which would be age 3 to 5, that those referrals begin to come from the to go to the district. That can be that a parent's concerned, a pediatrician has identified them, a preschool teacher, and those referrals then start going to the district to identify whether there's a need for service. There's also school age through high school. That again is covered through CSE at the district. And then exiting that would be young adult, adult, and geriatric. You might find those in rehabilitation centers, day programs, some of the work study programs, and of course, also in hospitals or somebody that would be in maybe a nursing home or rehab placement. For myself, I am not part of the district. I'm an independent contractor, as Jason stated, but I service kids who are identified in the district. So if there's a preschooler who has a speech and language need, I would pick that person up, even though they're a GATE student, because they're not under Renee's scope of service. So anybody before age 5 would fall under the preschool caseload, and I would go into preschools, daycares, homes. Very, very rarely, if a child is injured and they're doing a long-term hospital stay and get tutoring, it could go up to the hospital. Most of those actually have their own therapists that they contract. So when we think about speech and language, it's a misnomer because we're called the speech therapist. People often drop the language aspect, which ends up really being the bulk of what we do. But within the first area of speech and language is speech. That covers anything related to articulation, so the production of sounds and how a child, how intelligible or how clear their speech is, phonological processes, apraxia. Apraxia is a speech disorder that's a motor planning disorder that happens very brain-based neurologically, voice, resonance, and fluency. Fluency is what you may know as stuttering. My son did the transitions for me to play with PowerPoint, so his goal was to entertain. The other area is language. Within language, so speech is in one area, then we have another subgroup of language, and then language is also broken down into expressive language, receptive language, and believe it or not, literacy, written language. And I will talk to that in greater detail when we get there about when it becomes reading and when it becomes speech and language. So within expressive languages, how kids are able to communicate their ideas, their wants, their needs, command their environment. We look at how their length of utterance, how well they're able to combine words and create a thought. Grammatical features, word order, things like vocabulary. If kids are having problems with retrieval or they don't have a broad depth vocabulary, then that can end up being some really minimal and shallow language usage that doesn't always communicate and convey what they need. The other area is receptive language. So the opposite of what's going out is what's coming in, what's being understood, what are they comprehending of spoken language. This isn't reading yet, this is spoken language. And we will work on that in terms of listening and memory and making sense of words and questions. Within the domain of literacy, ASHA, the American Speech and Hearing Association, actually has what's the statement called, Renee? They have a scope and sequence of where our boundaries are, per se, within that. And for the most part, in order for it to be qualified under speech and language, it really needs to be that it's a reading comprehension problem related to an already diagnosed language issue. So if a child's having problem understanding spoken language, they may also be having trouble understanding written language. If their language is intact, but they're having trouble reading, they have dyslexia, a late onset of reading skills, that's different than language. So they would not qualify for a referral unless within their reading disorder, there is a phonological or their sound system problem where they're not able to hear, understand, or identify the sounds that are used in our alphabetic system for reading. Then beyond that is a larger area of language service, and that would be pragmatic language. Their functional use of language, how they're making sense of it and using it functionally in social situations. What's their cueing? Do they understand nonverbal body language? Are they able to assume a little bit of what's happening without being told every bit of detail? And also, do they give you reference to what they're talking about, or do they just go off on a tangent and assume you have their perspective? So those would be the main domains of language. And then, not commonly seen in schools, but in other settings, is feeding and swallowing. So the days I worked up at the hospital, that would be your stroke patients or somebody who had maybe cancer that resulted in a head neck injury and had to learn to swallow again or modify how they were swallowing. There's pediatric and adult. And pediatric, sometimes those come with comorbid illnesses or some developmental disabilities. And what we do for that is we, under the direction of a radiologist, we give a modified barium swallow study and provide different textures for them to swallow. And we examine how their swallow is going. And if needed, we do therapeutic intervention for that. Many times, especially in pediatrics, that's tied to oral motor. And for specific reasons, that's not always a school-based service or treatment that's provided, because it doesn't lend itself well to the school environment for many reasons around hygiene, privacy, and social acceptance. So most of the time, not always, there will always be exceptions, but most of the time, if you're talking about feeding and swallowing therapy, that's probably something that's supplemented outside of school. Is there anything you want to add to that, Renee?
No, when it comes to feeding and swallowing too, we need to look at the academic need for it. So sometimes it doesn't go with the school.
Right. It doesn't fit into what the main focus of school-based speech and language services would be. I'm going to end the slideshow or stop the share and come back on. Am I here? And then I can turn it over to Renee unless somebody has a question that fits in best right now. Otherwise, I'll let Renee talk about the school-based within Gates Chili.
That was really great. Can you just give me a really quick definition of what language is? It seems very basic and crazy, but I feel like I don't understand.
Nope.
Or there's a lot more I need to learn.
Interesting, because language actually is that there's about one strand of hair you could fit between language and cognition, and many times they overlap. So to give it a definition that pinpoints it would be a disservice, but in general, I think Renee would agree, we look at it as your use and understanding of communication. The words that you're using to convey your thoughts and ideas, and the words that you understand when somebody else is conveying their thoughts and ideas. But it overlaps with cognition, with memory, and trickles into some of the other speech domains that we talked about.
Right.
Okay. Renee, go ahead, enhance it.
All right. When you're ready, I can bring up my PowerPoint.
Are you there?
That was great.
Okay.
Yeah, here we go. So I am one of the speech therapists here in Gates Chili. And Carol, if you want to jump in at all, you can. Let me screen share for you. Let's see, here's my PowerPoint. I wanted to tell you that one of the main reasons I got into this field is because I just love communication. I love language. I love communication. I love all aspects of it. And I think communication is the human connection, is the key to personal and career success. And I really believe that. And I know that some people will argue what makes us human, but I think communication makes us human, and language. So I am here to answer the questions: what speech and language interventions does Gates Chili offer? And who is eligible for these interventions? Can you guys see this? You want me to get rid of this? Sorry, thanks, Adam. Is that better? Except now I can't see anything. So I'm going to start with, what services do SLPs provide in Gates Chili? And one thing I want you to think about is that the purpose of a speech language pathologist in the school system is to assist students in overcoming barriers that are there because of speech and language abilities so that they can't access their curriculum. Our purpose is not to make everybody on the same developmental level. The purpose is to make sure the students are accessing the curriculum that's given to them. And if they have a speech or language barrier to that, then we step in. And Carol, jump in anytime that you want to share. And how do we do this? Well, ASHA's policy, they state that speech language pathologists have to have a range of responsibilities that include prevention, assessment, intervention, program design, data collection, and compliance. So ASHA, our governing board for our profession, lists these things. So here in Gates Chili, what services do we provide? Generally speaking, we provide speech articulation intervention. We provide intervention for language expression. So when students are not communicating, when they're not able to express themselves appropriately or how they need to be, then we come in. Language understanding, that's that receptive language that Heather talked about. Social language, and under that, you're going to get the pragmatics and executive functioning. We'll step in when there's difficulty in that area. And voice and fluency, so that's stuttering and vocal, which is rare, but we do target those as well. So Gates Chili has a motto that is, together we teach and inspire excellence for all learners. I do like this motto, and there are two words in here that I think really encapsulate the message I'm trying to send out for what we do and how we do it. And the first word is together. So parents are part of the team. We do this together. SLPs are part of the student's educational team, not a separate entity. So it's not parents, teacher, SLP, PT, OT, whatever teachers involved, reading, AIS. We're a team and we need to come together for the student. The other word in the motto that I wanted to address is all learners. So when we talk about who does a speech language pathologist work with, now I know that when they're saying all learners, they're talking about everybody, teachers, therapists, administrators, parents. They're talking about all learners and students. For this presentation, I just want to communicate that the entire student body, we're talking about all learners. So we don't work with students who have IEP goals. We work with all the learners. So how do we do this? And I'm going to explain that what we do is we do a multi-tiered level of support. And I'm going to explain what this is. It's least restrictive, which means we start off minimal and then we can build up. And we provide the student with what they need to overcome a speech and language barrier. Okay, so these are terms we go by, but you don't need to know. They're not important, but this is how we talk. This is our lingo. We have tier 1, which is speech language services are available to all students. Tier 2, which is more differentiated instruction. Tier 3, which is a more intense level. And then beyond that is when you go to CSE and determine if an IEP is needed. So briefly, is there any questions right now? Okay, good. Tier 1, this is the least restrictive. This is when we're consulting with the teacher or the family. This is when we're providing resources. This is when we're in the classroom. Maybe we're teaching a whole lesson to the class. Maybe we're doing small group lessons. We might be observing a student because a teacher has a concern. Maybe there's just a small problem that the teacher has with this one particular situation with a student. So we might come in and help talk about the language or how we can present it differently, maybe give visuals or talk about a student who has a hearing impairment. How can we modify their environment to best suit their needs? This would be a tier 1. This is available to all students. So now we go to tier 2. This is a more targeted approach. So in tier 2, we've identified a specific area that a student is having trouble with. We develop a goal and we begin the data collection and progress monitoring. Parents are part of this team. They're aware of it. They have to approve that, yes, the student will be receiving the intervention services. They know what goal we're working on. They'll be getting progress notes at marking periods. And there may or may not be an evaluation at this point, but tier 2 is the majority of our speech language intervention services. This is where you're going to find your articulation therapy, your fluency interventions, most language interventions. Beyond tier 2 is a tier 3, which is a more intensive support. And at this point, other people are brought in usually. So it's more than just a speech and language intervention at this point. And it's basically the same. It looks the same as tier 2. It's just more intense. What you do want to know about the tiers is no matter what tier a student is in, parents are part of the team. Permission has to be obtained. Parents will know the goal. And one of the most important things is that the tiers are dynamic. They're not static. So a student can go from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, back to 2 to 1. It's not strict depending on the time. It's not dependent on the time of year or paperwork. They're dynamic. The last thing I want to tell you about the tiers is they're a really good thing. It's how we can provide services in the least restrictive way. And Gates Child Aid gives a lot of services. They give students so much support. I love working here because I can see how much support they give them. Let's see. The tiers, these services, they can be changed without a full meeting. There's always progress monitoring. They require less stringent qualifications. So if we just see a problem or parents have a concern, we can address that right away. It's available to all learners and parents are part of the team. Okay, so after tier 3, that's when we go to CSC, which is the Committee of Special Education, to determine if an IEP is appropriate. Speech and language services may or may not be a part of it. And the people there make recommendations and the committee decides. So those are the tiers. And overall, I want you to just remember two things. One is that the parents are always an important part of the team, and that the majority of speech language pathology services are given outside of the IEP.
Renee,
So,
can I ask a question?
of course.
Just for the sake of the audio, I'm not trying to be your devil's advocate. Just because this is being recorded, I wanted to ask, is the tier system only in Gates Chili, or is that something that's used in other districts? Is that a state level requirement?
It's used all around.
Okay, so that's a
would even
pretty
say the whole
universal
country.
method of being able to fluidly treat kids without being having the confines of an IEP.
It's currently the most acceptable.
Yeah, it's the gold standard is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Would you say so? And Carol Wilbur. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. In the elementary schools, let's see, we have multiple SLPs serving the schools, and we're very involved in tier 1. Every school has more than one SLP, which not a lot of districts can say. At the middle school, there are 2 SLPs in the Gates Middle School. The similarities to the elementary school is that the SLPs are always available for resources and just for a consultation for parents. And there's always a team approach. The differences, is that there's the CASP program, and the articulation services are rare in the middle school. That's really focused in the elementary school, whereas once a student gets to middle school, that's very limited. And pullout is much less often. And something that the middle school is always saying is, you know, when a student gets pulled out, you got to think about what they're missing. In middle school, all day, they're busy. They're scheduled, social studies, math, everything. So if they're getting pulled out for speech intervention, speech or language intervention, then they're missing something. But the truth is that's happening at the elementary level. Our kids are busy all day long. Even downtime is not downtime. They have structured social emotional building time that may look like it's downtime, but it's actually very purposeful, directed building time. So pullout is something that should not be taken lightly. In high school, there's one SLP, and the similarities, again, is that the SLP in the high school is always available to parents, and there's a team approach. The difference is that the CASP program is a little bit different there, and they serve IEP students, whereas the middle school CASP program, you don't have to have an IEP to participate in that, and their services are primarily IEP driven. Okay. Kind of flew through that, but I wanted to get it all out. Thank you.
That was awesome, Renee.
What questions have come up because of it?
What does CASP stand for again?
Communication and social
Social skills.
Yeah, social skills program.
Thank you.
And I wanted to point out for Renee and with Renee that if you notice the pattern that as you move up through high school, there really is a gradual and a natural decrease in service need and service delivery. And many times that's reflective of, first and foremost, development. Articulation in middle school is very rare because by that age, most of those sounds should be in place. Second of all, that natural, as they grow and mature, they learn, the services do their job. And so they have learned to overcome a hurdle, or they've learned to circumvent an issue. And by the time you reach to high school, it's that group of learners where this is going to be an ongoing or a residual situation, and we will continue to address it as it presents itself at that level. But for the most part, we've done a lot of early intervention work and early onset therapeutic services, and they did their job, and we don't need all of that as you climb up into those high school grades. And I'm not at liberty to put Carol Wilbur on the spot, but I would love to know if you want to add anything to either presentation.
Renee, I really like your quote about communication, making the human connection. I mean, all of our students, even, I mean, I work with a lot of the nonverbal students, and when they get those first words, it's just such a gift for parents, for the kids, and it's just a wonderful thing. And also, even your kindergarten kids that have articulation problems, bringing that all together and giving them that power to communicate and stuff. I just like your quote a lot. Thanks for that.
I like it because it's communication and not language. Communication is so much more than just words coming out of people's mouths. We know a lot of kids who communicate without words.
Yeah, but giving that gift, even your stroke patients, you know, I've worked in stroke, and giving them back the gift of communications, like, whoa. I remember you just working, and it's like, where's that lady? She's gone away for the weekend. When she come back on Monday, you know, it's a great thing to have that, giving that gift there. So I just really appreciate that quote.
Thank you.
As a parent, I've been able to witness some of that too, because I have one of my kiddos struggles with the language piece of it. And it is like Christmas or my birthday when I hear a sentence or something, like you almost don't know what you're missing until you realize that it wasn't there, until you get it again. So it's thanks for bringing that gift, and for all of you for helping bring that out in so many kiddos. But I agree with experiencing that joy is just, it's incredible, and it keeps you moving too.
Yeah, it is great. That's fun.
I can speak from the teacher perspective that we really lean on our SLPs for a lot of things. And when Renee says that we coordinate and we plan and we go to each other for professional questions, it's true. It's not just lip service for this meeting, but we really do work as a team. And, you know, teachers realize their limitations and move to the speech teacher and find good ideas and work with the teacher to implement those ideas, and they're consistent. It is something that just almost happens naturally at Gage Chili. In every room that I've been in, and I've been in 12-on-1s and ICTs and AIS, and the speech teachers are always there. They're always hovering around, bopping in and out of rooms, and very approachable. So I really like the team effort at Gage Chili. And I can say it's not like that everywhere, because I have worked in other districts and sometimes it becomes very fragmented, but it's always been a team approach here since I've been here.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And I'll add from the parent perspective that I am always in the loop. In fact, we went on our first family vacation since before COVID, and Carol had emailed me saying, send me family pictures. We'll use them for building on communication. So I really do appreciate it. And Tyler loves Mrs. Wilbur.
I just had to make one comment. He was so funny when we tried to drag him in onto that Kahoot on that Friday.
Oh.
Amber's like, no Kahoot. All right, sorry.
Oh yeah, that video was cute. Yep.
Funny.
And actually, let me also say, so when COVID, we all had to be home last March, Carol found this animated app with these animals, and Tyler really took to it, and she found something that he was really motivated by, and she kept going with it. And that was like the highlight of COVID for me, was seeing how much he loved seeing. He would be so excited when it was a speech day.
I love that. That's awesome. Nice job, Carol.
Last year's speech during COVID was a challenge for preschool. My little one was 3 at the time, and the computer wasn't quite working. But what I had to kind of revert back to, which helped us, was early intervention, and how that is play-based and parent is included in the living room. And I just had to like get her off of the screen and play with her with a house and pretend. So instead, like the therapist was watching us do the work in the home. So it's empowering the parents to do it. And then I was like, okay, we've done this before. And that's really what helped us during COVID, but it's definitely been a challenge. And I recognize that parents, I think, and therapists have had to flex so quickly. But I think in a lot of ways, I think we've learned a lot. And there are some things that I think that we're going to keep once we get through this. And it was great to be able to utilize my bag of tricks that I've learned from several therapists now to see what works, what doesn't. And I have one more question too, separate one. Where does language-based learning disabilities fall under your domain as well? Or how does that work?
Yes. Mm-hmm. For sure. So we would see what difficulties the child's having in school and just move up through the tiers as needed. If we needed a tier 1 intervention, if we could help address the need in the classroom, then that's what we'll do. And then if it needs a more targeted approach, if there's a specific thing that's standing in the way, maybe the student isn't learning, gosh, I'm having a hard time thinking. If you're talking about language and learning, it would be like following directions or understanding the main idea, or maybe not understanding, utter chunks of language. Then we'll target that and see if that will help them overcome. And for speech language pathologists, we're kind of a unique bird in that when people think of the tiers, they think of this short term, we're going to do this for 6 to 8 weeks and reevaluate, which is what we do. But we know that students go into speech and language therapy and it can go on until we decide that we're okay now. So it's not a short term thing. Whereas like the tiers, sometimes people think of them as short term, but we kind of hang out in tier 2 quite a bit. It's our comfy place. Does that help at all?
I think so. I'm still learning about MTSS and RTI and how that works. And I understand it's there to prevent, to avoid the wait to fail approach. So I appreciate that. But things like phonemic awareness is really important, specifically to my family because I have language-based learning disabilities, and just knowing how those are identified in those areas how are they identified maybe in their district and then targeted, I guess maybe is my other question from that. Because there were some assessment, and I know we used a lot of assessments because there's not one thing that captures everything. So it is important to use more than one, but some of the needs weren't necessarily picked up on, and some of the typical things. So I'm wondering if there's other types of, specific to like phonemic awareness, things that students can be screened with, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a hot button that, reading AIS is really a major part of now, and deciding where we stand in that and what is the child's curriculum and what is in the way of accessing that. And that's where we come in. It's not just to keep going up, but it's here's the curriculum, I'll have kindergarten teachers come to me and say, this student is behind in this. Okay, but are they progressing? Are they learning from your teaching methods? How can we change your methods first? Is the barrier happening because there's a language learning difficulty, or is there a barrier happening somewhere else that's a fix that's not going to affect their environment at this time, that we can just adjust what's happening? Does that make sense? So, and again, we have great reading AIS teachers. I'm really happy with our reading group that we collaborate all the time with. But that's an exciting area. That's fun to be part of. And it's so closely tied to speech and language learning and phonology and all of it. And Tina, I'll say, like with the tiers and the MTSS and the RTI, it's like different year, different acronym. It's always the same. But what's happening, what's good is that it takes so long for CPSE and for IEPs, and they're so stringent. You know, if an IEP says an individual session, then I cannot put that child into a group. Whereas when it's in the tiers, if we're working on something and this group is working on something, and it would be so motivating for the student, there's that flexibility for what we need, what the student needs, and it can happen with permission from parents and everything else. So it's exciting. It's a good thing.
You can use more of professional discretion and collaborate. That's a really great observation. Thanks for sharing that. And I also wanted to thank you for mentioning.
It's huge. Yeah.
You mentioned parents no less than 5 times in your presentation, maybe more than that. And I appreciate hearing that too, because at the end of the day, like the kids always come home to us, and we have them every day until they're, oh gosh, 18, or maybe, I don't know. I'm not there yet. But to let parents know that, yeah, we've got a role to play in this as well, and we are a part of the team. But as I've learned, like when I started out, I didn't necessarily know what my role was or how it was. But really, if a parent has any concerns ever, to talk to your teacher and to talk to these therapists, because they're extremely approachable and really want to do best by our kids. That has been my experience. So thank you for mentioning parents and that collaboration too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're the expert on your kids. Always.
Hi guys, I just wanted to say I've surrounded myself with some really great SLPs throughout the years. I could not do my job without the support of all the therapists that I've worked with, more specifically kind of navigating the realm of communication and social language impairments and disorders. I have found my speech therapists to be some of my most grounded, most well-received, and also most approachable group of folks. I get the luxury of, I'm housed at Paul Road, and I get to observe and, observe sessions with students all day long. And the amount of skill that it takes to be a speech therapist, to bounce from one child to the next and prepare materials, and not only have the ability to bounce from play-based therapy to jumping into articulation therapy or other types of drills or other types of interventions, it's a lot. And I just think they manage it quite well, and it's nice to be a part of a team that really kind of navigates all those different areas of development and does it with ease and grace and a smile on their face. The one thing I wanted to ask was, do you guys find that as students age that the therapy becomes more pragmatic and social and less focused on those kind of emergent language articulation type skills? That was my only other question.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good observation. Personally, I'm definitely a whole picture type of person. Sometimes the details are not my strong suit, but I'm always thinking about, what is the meaning of this? What am I doing for this child right now? Is this goal so that they learn whatever it is? How is this going to connect them to their curriculum? How is it going to connect them to their peers? Even when they're young? And I'm always looking at that, like, if somebody has a concern about a student, I'm like, okay, what is really the reason here? Like, what really caused this red flag? It may not have been, sometimes it's just a gut instinct from a teacher that's like, I don't know, something's just different. So I don't know why they're not connecting with other students, or why and it's something that can easily be overcome or taught. And I think, so yes, as they get older, it does. But for me, that's at the core always, even when they're in kindergarten.
Thank you.
Carol?
I think pragmatics they're always individual to each child. They're always there. I mean, at the elementary level, just even getting to say hi, have that contact, give and take, there's a little play. It's totally different than the middle school. You have the unwritten curriculum about what's going on up there. And sometimes it's even daunting for adults up there. And then you get to the high school and it kind of gets a little bit better. But yeah, pragmatics is always there. And it's one of the first impressions, especially you bake. So you want to make that good one. So you're always working on it, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I love being part of the Gates team.
Do it well.
Yes, we love having you. So are there any other questions?
If anyone listening to the recording has questions that weren't already represented, they can also message the SEPTO page on Facebook. There's also an email, and somebody can get back to you and support you in that way.
Yep. And you can find us, we have our own link right from the Gates Child School District website. So you can find all of our information there. I am going to end my recording once.